Do you like live television? I love it. I think it is probably the most terrifying medium in the world. I can't tell you how often when they say 30 seconds to air, I think to myself, oh.
What really happened behind the scenes of Bewitched, the charming sitcom that cast a spell on millions? Was it just magic and laughter? Or was something darker brewing beyond the camera? From sudden cast changes to real-life heartbreak, the truth behind TV's most enchanting housewife is far more complex than you might think.
Okay, get ready for a big pop.
Broomstick-riding witch, a suburban home, and a dash of household magic might sound like a recipe for fantasy, but in 1964, it became the formula for one of television's most beloved sitcoms. Bewitched wasn't just another show about domestic life. It introduced audiences to a world where everyday routines collided with supernatural charm. With its quirky humor, light-hearted tone, and a lead character unlike any other on TV at the time, the show captured imaginations from the very first episode. The idea for Bewitched was sparked by the creative mind of producer Sol Sachs, drawing inspiration from earlier films such as I Married a Witch, 1942, and Bell, Book and Candle, 1958. Sachs saw the potential to bring a similar magical concept to television. Both films dealt with the theme of a witch trying to lead a normal life while navigating human relationships. And Sachs translated this into a modern sitcom format. Unlike in the movies, though, the magic in Bewitched was integrated into the structure of everyday life, making it less about spectacle and more about subtle comedy, relationships, and misunderstandings. The show's pilot episode was titled, I, Darrin, Take This Witch, Samantha, and it laid the foundation for everything to come. In it, viewers are introduced to Samantha, a seemingly ordinary woman who reveals to her new husband Darrin during their honeymoon that she is in fact a witch. Samantha, played by Elizabeth Montgomery, is kind-hearted, elegant, and determined to settle into suburban life without relying on her powers. Darrin, portrayed by Dick York, is an advertising executive who, although shocked at the revelation, agrees to make the marriage work, on the condition that Samantha refrains from using her magic. This premise gave the show its central tension. Every episode played with the idea of Samantha trying to fit into the human world while constantly facing situations where a little magic might help or make things worse. Her attempts to live as a normal housewife were often disrupted by magical mishaps, visits from meddling relatives, and the challenges of hiding her true identity. The mix of relatable domestic issues and whimsical fantasy created a format that was both comforting and unpredictable. Bringing the show to life involved more than a clever script. It required careful coordination between creative teams, production staff, and cast. Bewitched was produced by Screen Gems, a television division of Columbia Pictures. Conveniently, Columbia already owned the rights to the films that inspired Sachs, which helped avoid legal complications. The show's director was William Asher, a seasoned television professional who also happened to be married to Elizabeth Montgomery at the time. Asher's experience in comedy and his close relationship with Montgomery added a personal layer to the show's production style. Filming of the pilot episode was completed in 1963, but shortly after, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy caused a temporary halt to television production across the country. The team resumed work a few months later, and the show officially debuted on ABC on September 17, 1964. Right from the start, it proved to be a hit with audiences. Its mix of magical whimsy and suburban normalcy felt fresh, especially during a time when most shows followed a more traditional family dynamic. Visually, Bewitched had a distinct look that made it stand out. The Stevens home, given the fictional address of 1164 Morning Glory Circle, became one of television's most recognizable houses. Though the address was made up, the exterior shots were filmed at the Warner Brothers Ranch in Burbank, California, a backlot used frequently for TV and movie productions. Interior scenes were shot on a soundstage, with the set designed to look like a warm, middle-class American home. It had an adaptable layout that allowed different rooms to be changed around depending on the needs of each episode. This included switching out living rooms for nurseries, offices, or guest bedrooms as the storyline evolved. The flexibility of the set wasn't just for visual appeal. It allowed the creators to move the story forward without needing to constantly rebuild or shoot on new locations. This practical approach was especially useful during episodes that involved magical transformations or unexpected visits from other characters. With minimal changes, the same space could feel new and different, helping the show stay visually dynamic without overwhelming production costs. The characters themselves also helped root the magic in everyday life. Samantha wasn't a stereotypical witch. No warts, no black cloak, no evil cackling. Instead, she was stylish, graceful, and intelligent. Her magic was subtle, often used to clean the house, solve a minor problem, or prevent a situation from escalating. This modern take on the witch archetype helped break away from older portrayals that leaned heavily into the gothic or villainous. Samantha's personality was grounded and kind, making her relatable despite her supernatural powers. Darrin, by contrast, was the straight man in the relationship. His reactions to Samantha's powers and to her eccentric family created much of the show's comedy. He wanted a normal life, and yet he found himself constantly surrounded by spells, mishaps, and relatives from another realm. The chemistry between Montgomery and York brought warmth to their relationship, helping audiences invest emotionally in their dynamic, even as magic swirled around them. Another key character was Endora, Samantha's strong-willed mother, played by Agnes Moorehead. Endora disapproved of Samantha's marriage to a mortal and frequently tried to sabotage the relationship in humorous ways. Her dramatic entrances, disdainful glares, and colourful wardrobe added a theatrical edge to the show. She became a fan favourite and played a crucial role in keeping the magical world present and active within the otherwise mundane setting. The combination of thoughtful production design, relatable characters, and clever writing gave Bewitched a strong foundation. The show didn't rely solely on magic to carry it forward. It used magic as a storytelling device to reflect real-life themes. Topics such as compromise in relationships, adjusting to in-laws, the desire to fit in, and managing expectations were all explored through the lens of Samantha's unique situation. Her powers often symbolized the things people hide or tone down in order to be accepted, a metaphor that quietly resonated with many viewers, particularly women navigating traditional domestic roles during the 1960 AS. At a time when the television landscape was filled with formulaic family sitcoms, Bewitched stood out for its originality. It didn't just follow the typical path of husband goes to work and wife keeps house. It added complications, contradictions, and questions, albeit wrapped in humor and charm. That balance of realism and fantasy became one of the show's trademarks and helped it rise quickly in the ratings. Although it was designed as light entertainment, Bewitched managed to reflect and gently critique some of the social norms of its time. Samantha's abilities and the tension they created in her marriage offered a subtle commentary on the pressures faced by women to conform. While the show never overtly addressed gender politics, the fact that Samantha often solved problems more effectively with her powers than Darrin could with logic or effort wasn't lost on audiences. The pilot's success set the stage for what would become a long and influential run. With strong performances, a fresh concept, and a flexible format, Bewitched quickly established itself as one of the most distinctive sitcoms of its era. It didn't just introduce viewers to a magical character, it invited them to imagine what everyday life might look like if just a little magic were real. And perhaps more importantly, it made people laugh while doing so. When Bewitched premiered on American television in 1964, it was clear right away that it had struck a chord with viewers. The show arrived at a moment when sitcoms were evolving, and its blend of domestic life and fantasy comedy offered something new. By the end of its first season, Bewitched had become one of the most watched shows in the country. Its rise in popularity wasn't just about clever writing or quirky magic tricks. It had something deeper that made it stand out. Created by Saul Sachs and brought to life by producer-director William Asher, the show featured Elizabeth Montgomery in the lead role as Samantha Stevens, a witch who wanted nothing more than to live a normal, non-magical life with her husband. The series' premise was simple on the surface. A woman with supernatural powers tries to suppress them to fit into a typical suburban household. But underneath that simplicity was a surprisingly thoughtful look at relationships, identity, and the struggle to balance individuality with conformity. From the outset, the casting played a significant role in the show's appeal. Elizabeth Montgomery's performance as Samantha was full of warmth, wit, and a quiet strength that made her instantly likable. Her chemistry with co-star Dick York, who played her husband Darrin, brought a believable dynamic to their on-screen marriage. Audiences were drawn to their affectionate bickering and occasional misunderstandings, which reflected the reality of many relationships at the time. Dick York's portrayal of Darrin was also a key element in making the show work. He was exasperated by the chaos magic often brought into their lives, but his love for Samantha always shone through. His reactions were relatable for viewers who were themselves navigating the unpredictability of married life and growing family responsibility. Adding to the charm was a strong supporting cast that rounded out the show's world. Agnes Moorehead played Endora, Samantha's outspoken and often meddlesome mother. With her grand entrances, theatrical flair, and constant disapproval of Darrin, Endora became one of the most memorable characters on the show. She was proud of her daughter's powers and never missed a chance to remind Samantha that marrying a mortal was a mistake. Yet even as she caused trouble, there was always an underlying affection, albeit begrudgingly, that made her more complex than a typical sitcom antagonist. David White played Larry Tate, Darrin's boss at the advertising firm McMahon and Tate. He was a classic TV boss character, concerned with appearances and success, but also often caught in the middle of Samantha's magic-induced disruptions. His character helped move the storylines beyond the home and into Darrin's workplace, expanding the scope of the series. The show also introduced the character of Tabitha, Samantha and Darrin's daughter, in later seasons. Her revival added a new layer to the story, as the question of whether she would inherit her mother's powers became a recurring theme. The presence of a magical child gave the writers opportunities for new kinds of plots and fresh challenges for the Stevens family. Beyond the cast and characters, Bewitched storylines were crafted in a way that combined humor with heart. Episodes typically followed a format where Samantha's desire to live a normal life would be tested by a situation that required her to use her powers. Sometimes it was a household chore that needed a magical shortcut. Other times it was an awkward dinner party or a client at Darrin's office who needed impressing. These situations usually spun out of control, creating comedic tension before being resolved in a satisfying way by the end of the episode. This formula worked well for the show's audience, but what made Bewitched particularly noteworthy was its ability to subtly reflect changing societal values. Samantha's struggle to downplay her identity in order to fit into a conventional mold mirrored what many women were experiencing in real life. In the 1960s, traditional gender roles were beginning to shift. More women were questioning their roles as housewives and looking for more autonomy and self-expression. While Bewitched never positioned itself as political, its central character, a woman with immense power who chose to restrain herself for the sake of her husband and social expectations, resonated on a deeper level with viewers. Despite being a fantasy sitcom, the show touched on themes like self-control, individuality, and compromise. Samantha's powers, which could have easily solved every problem in seconds, were kept in check, not because they were dangerous, but because she wanted to maintain harmony in her marriage and live by human standards. This was often challenged by her family, especially Endora, who didn't see the value in blending in. The tension between the magical and mortal worlds became a metaphor for the choices people make in their relationships and communities. The early seasons of Bewitched were filmed in black and white, with the first 74 episodes produced in this format. Even without color, the visual style of the show was effective in creating a world that felt both familiar and enchanting. Eventually, as technology progressed and color television became more widespread, later episodes were filmed in color, adding more visual flair to the magical effects and helping the show stand out even more in syndication. Stevens' home remained one of the most iconic elements of the show. Its cozy interiors, neat garden, and suburban setting represented the ideal middle-class lifestyle of the era. Whether Samantha was zapping dishes clean or hiding a floating object from a nosy neighbor, the setting served as a perfect backdrop for both the comedy and the commentary. The show's influence spread quickly. It wasn't just popular in the United States, it also gained fans in the UK and other countries where it aired. Its universal themes of family, love, and identity gave it broad appeal. By the time it reached its peak, Bewitched was one of the highest-rated shows on television, often ranking in the top 10. Its success also helped pave the way for other fantasy sitcoms. Shows like I Dream of Jeannie and The Addams Family followed in its footsteps, using magical or supernatural premises to explore everyday situations. Bewitched had shown that audiences were eager for something different, stories that combined humor with imaginative twists. Over the years, the show inspired a number of spin-offs, reboots, and adaptations. Its format, characters, and themes proved adaptable and continued to influence television long after the original series ended. While the show remained lighthearted, its impact on TV storytelling was significant. It helped demonstrate that a show could be both entertaining and subtly reflective of its time. The popularity of Bewitched also rested on its consistency. Week after week, audiences knew they could tune in for a mix of charm, mishaps, and magical surprises. The writing team managed to keep the tone balanced, never too serious, but never completely silly either. It struck a middle ground that allowed viewers of all ages to enjoy it. One of the show's enduring strengths was its ability to adapt within a familiar structure. As the seasons progressed, new characters were introduced and older ones evolved, keeping the show feeling fresh without abandoning its core. This approach helped maintain interest and allowed Bewitched to run for 8 seasons, producing a total of 254 episodes. Despite the light-hearted nature of the show, Bewitched never shied away from touching on emotions. Episodes occasionally explored deeper themes, such as loss, acceptance, and the challenges of raising a family. These moments gave the characters more depth and made them feel real, even in a world where magic was part of the everyday. Looking back, Bewitched succeeded not just because of its concept, but because of how that concept was executed. It invited viewers into a world that felt familiar, yet full of possibilities. Samantha's journey wasn't just about spells and broomsticks, it was about navigating life's everyday hurdles with grace, humor, and a touch of the extraordinary. While Bewitched looked effortless on screen, filled with floating objects, blinking spells, and people disappearing with a twitch of a nose, the reality behind the scenes was far more complex. Creating the illusion of magic in the 1,960 sets required creativity, precision, and a lot of trial and error. Long before digital effects became standard in film and television, the production team of Bewitched relied entirely on practical methods to bring Samantha's magical world to life. The show's signature effect, Samantha wiggling her nose to cast spells, became iconic. However, contrary to popular belief, Elizabeth Montgomery wasn't actually moving her nose. What viewers saw was a twitch of her upper lip, carefully timed with sound effects and visual cues. The charm of the gesture helped define the character and became a pop culture reference, imitated endlessly by fans. Special effects director Dick Halbane was one of the key figures responsible for making the show's magic feel believable. He and his team used a combination of stop-motion photography, trapdoors, wires, camera tricks, and clever editing to simulate spells and supernatural events. When an object vanished or reappeared, it wasn't the result of computer animation. It was often achieved by stopping the camera, changing the scene slightly, and then resuming the shot. The technique, though simple by today's standards, was cutting edge at the time and required exact timing from both the actors and the crew. When Samantha made objects float, the team used thin wires that were carefully positioned to stay out of the camera's frame. To make a chair move on its own or a door open with no one nearby, hidden crew members operated pulleys or triggered mechanisms off camera. These stunts had to be rehearsed repeatedly to ensure that everything looked smooth on film. Even small errors meant retakes, which could stretch filming time and challenge everyone's patience. More elaborate effects involved split-screen filming, particularly in episodes where Elizabeth Montgomery played both Samantha and her mischievous cousin Serena. To show both characters in the same shot, the crew would film Montgomery on one side of the frame, then again on the other with a carefully placed split down the middle. The camera had to remain completely still between shots, and Montgomery had to match her timing perfectly, so the interactions between the two characters felt natural. These scenes were technically demanding and time-consuming, but often became fan favorites. Despite the light-hearted tone of the series, the production of Bewitched faced several serious challenges, especially when it came to its cast. One of the most significant difficulties involved Dick York, who played Darrin Stevens for the show's first 5 seasons. York had sustained a debilitating back injury years earlier during the filming of a movie. The injury left him with chronic pain, which became increasingly difficult to manage over time. At first, the production tried to accommodate his condition by reducing the amount of physical activity he was required to do on set. In many scenes, York could be seen sitting or leaning against furniture to help relieve the pressure on his back. As the series progressed, his mobility became more limited, and he relied on pain medication to get through filming days. Despite his efforts to continue working, his health took a dramatic turn in 1969. During the filming of an episode, York collapsed on set and was rushed to hospital. It was clear he could no longer carry on in the role. His departure marked a major turning point for the show. Dick York had brought a specific energy and warmth to the character of Darrin, and his chemistry with Elizabeth Montgomery had been a big part of the show's early success. Replacing him was not a decision the producers took lightly. Eventually, actor Dick Sargent was brought in to take over the role, beginning in season 6. While Sargent brought his own charm to the role and had a similar look, many viewers felt the dynamic between Samantha and Darrin changed noticeably. The transition between the two actors was never addressed within the show's storyline. There was no explanation for why Darrin suddenly looked different. Viewers were simply expected to accept the change and move on. While many did, others found it jarring, and the shift had a lasting impact on how some fans viewed the later seasons. Alongside York's departure, there were also tensions behind the scenes that stemmed from the personal lives of the show's stars and creators. William Asher, the show's director and producer, was married to Elizabeth Montgomery, but their relationship became increasingly strained over the years. Working together day after day added stress to their marriage, and eventually both became involved in relationships outside of their marriage. Asher's infidelity and Montgomery's growing connection to one of the show's other directors, Richard Michaels, caused tension on set that was hard to ignore. Despite these issues, both Asher and Montgomery remained professional in their work. Montgomery in particular continued to give consistent performances, keeping Samantha's charm intact. Still, the underlying friction could sometimes be felt in the tone of the later episodes. The light-hearted magic that once defined the series started to feel more subdued, and some episodes leaned more heavily on reused plots and predictable humor. Elise rejuvenates. And there is a moment when Peter... It wasn't just the main cast dealing with pressure. The entire crew, especially those involved in effects and set design, worked under tight schedules and limited budgets, creating magical effects week after week without the benefit of modern technology meant constantly inventing new solutions with limited resources. The creativity involved in designing each scene was impressive, but it took its toll over the years. There were also cast members who faced personal loss or health challenges during the run of the show. Alice Pierce, who played the original nosy neighbor Gladys Kravitz, passed away from cancer during the second season. She had kept her illness private during production, and her death shocked both fans and cast members. Pierce was later replaced by actress Sandra Gould, who brought a more exaggerated version of the character to the screen. Through all these ups and downs, the show continued to deliver episodes that entertained audiences. But behind the magic, there was a growing sense that the spark which had made the show so special was being tested. Changing cast dynamics, personal tensions, and the natural wear and tear of producing a weekly series all contributed to a shift in tone. Still, many involved in the production remained dedicated to preserving the show's identity. They took pride in the fact that Bewitched had helped push boundaries in television. From its innovative effects to its subtle social commentary, the show had done more than just entertain. It had carved out a space for fantasy storytelling in mainstream TV. The resilience of the cast and crew in the face of these challenges is one of the reasons the show remained on the air for as long as it did. Despite health problems, personal conflicts, and changing viewer tastes, they continued to produce episodes that drew in loyal audiences. The world of Samantha and Darrin, with all its quirks and charms, still had a pull that was hard to resist. As the production entered its later years, the signs of wear began to show. But looking back, it's clear that what the team behind Bewitched accomplished was far ahead of its time. They laid the groundwork for future shows that would blend the fantastical with the familiar. The challenges they faced didn't diminish their impact. In many ways, they highlighted just how much dedication went into making the magic feel real. As Bewitched moved into its later seasons, signs of fatigue began to show. What had started as a fresh and engaging fantasy sitcom was beginning to struggle to hold onto its magic. Ratings, while still strong, started to decline, and the reasons behind that downturn were both creative and personal. For a show that had once defined its genre, the challenge became not just maintaining its charm, but staying relevant in a rapidly changing television landscape. One of the biggest turning points in the show's trajectory had already happened with the departure of Dick York, the original actor who played Darrin Stevens. His replacement by Dick Sargent brought a shift in tone. While Sargent was a capable actor and handled the role with professionalism, many fans never fully warmed up to the new Darrin. The chemistry between Samantha and Darrin was one of the show's cornerstones, and when that dynamic changed, some viewers began to feel a disconnect. For audiences who had grown attached to the original couple's rhythm and rapport, the change felt like a missing piece of the puzzle. But the casting change wasn't the only issue. By the time the show entered its 7th and 8th seasons, the plots had started to feel repetitive. In earlier episodes, the magical chaos felt inventive and whimsical, but in the later years, it began to resemble a formula. Episodes often followed a predictable cycle. Samantha would try to avoid using magic, something would go wrong, she'd eventually have to cast a spell to fix things, and by the end of the episode, everything would return to normal with little consequence. The novelty that once set Bewitched apart had started to wear thin. Part of the problem was that the show didn't evolve with its audience. While the world outside was rapidly changing, the late 1960s and early 1970s brought cultural revolutions, civil rights movements, and shifting views on gender roles. Bewitched remained fixed in a more traditional view of suburban life. The depiction of Samantha as a devoted housewife began to feel increasingly outdated. Early in the show's run, this dynamic had come across as clever and subversive. But as societal expectations shifted, Samantha's limited role felt more restrictive than empowering. The feminist movement was gaining momentum at the time, and with it came a new public conversation about women's autonomy and equality. While Samantha had always been portrayed as strong and capable, her willingness to suppress her abilities to conform to her husband's wishes no longer resonated in the same way. Viewers who once found her choice charming began to question why a woman with such power should have to constantly hide it to make others comfortable. At the same time, television itself was undergoing a transformation. New shows like All in the Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and Maude were tackling contemporary issues with sharper writing and more grounded characters. These shows explored themes such as politics, gender, race, and class in ways that reflected real-life experiences. Compared to this new wave of programming, Bewitched began to feel like a relic of a simpler, less complicated era. Its fantasy elements and moral of the week storytelling didn't quite match the tone of what was now dominating primetime TV. Even behind the scenes, the energy that had once driven the show was beginning to wane. Elizabeth Montgomery had been playing Samantha since 1964, and after nearly a decade in the role, she was ready to move on. Her marriage to William Asher, the show's director and producer, had also deteriorated, and that strain impacted the working environment. Though both remained professional, their personal issues affected the overall morale of the production. By the end of the 8th season, Montgomery was no longer interested in continuing with the show, regardless of its ratings or renewal potential. Interestingly, Bewitched was not cancelled due to poor ratings. While its viewership had declined, the show was still popular enough for ABC to renew it for a potential 9th season. However, with Montgomery's decision to step away from the role and no clear replacement for the central character, there was little reason to continue. The show's magic was so tied to Samantha, her personality, her struggles, and her presence, that it was difficult to imagine Bewitched without her. The series concluded in 1972, closing a chapter on one of the most iconic shows in television history. Its impact, however, continued well beyond its original run. Bewitched became a staple of syndication, playing on television around the world for decades. It inspired future series, from Sabrina the Teenage Witch to Charmed, and influenced countless writers and producers in the fantasy and comedy genres. After the show ended, the cast members moved in different directions. Elizabeth Montgomery was determined to break away from her image as the cheerful housewife witch and took on more serious and dramatic roles. One of her most notable post-Bewitched performances was in the 1974 television movie A Case of Rape, where she played a woman fighting for justice after a violent attack. The film was groundbreaking for its time and earned Montgomery critical acclaim and an Emmy nomination. She continued to work in television and film through the 1980s and 1990s, often choosing roles that allowed her to challenge expectations and advocate for social issues. Dick York, who had left the show in 1969 due to health issues, struggled with chronic pain for the rest of his life. After leaving acting, he turned his focus to helping others, becoming an advocate for people experiencing homelessness and working with charitable organizations. Though his acting career was cut short, his later work was deeply meaningful to him. He passed away in 1992 from emphysema. Dick Sargent, who replaced York in the role of Darrin, continued acting after Bewitched in various television roles. In 1991, he made headlines when he publicly came out as gay, using his platform to support LGBTQ+ rights, at a time when such openness was still rare in Hollywood. His courage and advocacy earned him respect from many in the entertainment industry. He passed away from prostate cancer in 1994. Agnes Moorehead, who played Endora, also continued acting until her death in 1974. With a career spanning decades before Bewitched, she was already a respected actress in film, television, and radio. Her portrayal of Endora remains one of her most memorable roles, and she brought both gravitas and humor to the part. Other cast members like David White, who played Darrin's boss Larry Tate, continued working in television, appearing in shows like Columbo and The Rockford Files. He remained active in the industry until his death in 1990. Erin Murphy, who played Tabitha Stevens as a child, acted occasionally but eventually transitioned into work behind the scenes and in media hosting. She has also remained connected to fans of Bewitched, frequently attending fan events and reflecting on her time on the show. Despite its decline in popularity during its final seasons, the legacy of Bewitched endures. The show holds a unique place in television history as one of the first successful fantasy sitcoms. Its influence is seen in how later shows blended everyday life with supernatural elements. It also helped pave the way for stronger female characters on screen, even if Samantha's story was more subtle in its messaging. However, as the legacy of Bewitched endured, the story was also accessible in its message. What stands out most about Bewitched is its balance of the fantastical and the familiar. It didn't just rely on spells and special effects to keep viewers interested. It told stories about relationships, compromise, and the desire to belong. Samantha's world may have been magical, but her struggles were human. Over 50 years after it first aired, Bewitched is still remembered fondly by generations of viewers, whether it was Samantha turning a grumpy neighbor into a frog, and Dora throwing a sarcastic remark across the living room, or Darrin navigating yet another magical mishap. The show left behind moments that continue to charm audiences today.